Coffee Confessions, part whatever. This lady, she's all about tipping. All about the concept of tipping. We've all been there. We've all dealt with tipping. Everybody tips. There's a million different ways to tip. Every option has tipping. Your credit card's tips, automatic tips, 20% gratuity on a group of 15, whatever. Chips everybody's tipping. Tipping. And I'm in the line, and the lady comes up, and she's just like, hey, I want to tip, or I don't want to tip at all. I just don't want to tip. I feel that what you're doing is not worthy of a tip. And then she feels the need, instead of just clicking the thing, ringing her coffee up, clicking the thing, no tip, and then leaving it at that, she has to express to her entire party of people that she isn't tipping in front of the barista who's about to make your drink, which is never a good move. Do not do that, because that's exactly how you get a dirty thumb in your beverage, or, you know, a shit coffee anyway, because it's already going to be not great. And then they come up there and they're like, dude, I don't tip, and I'm going to give you my philosophy on tipping. And you know what a person who lives on tips does not want to hear? Your philosophy of why you, the fuckface, don't tip. You know? They don't want to hear it, because we don't care. If you get paid tips, you don't give a shit why someone doesn't tip and what their grand philosophy is about not tipping. We just know you're a douchebag. That's what we know. As a person who gets tips, I don't get tips anymore. But having worked in the place, when you're in that situation, you don't give a fuck what makes people not tip. You don't care. And she's like, well, if you're doing a service, you hit the threshold. I was minding my own business. I was ordering my shit. I tipped. Whatever. Not a big deal. It is what it is. I'm getting my shit. And then you decide to go on a tear about how you're not going to tip. And you want everybody to know. It's very important that they know that you're not tipping, because philosophically you don't tip. Only under certain conditions are you accepting the premise of tipping. And I was like, okay, come on, dude. Please don't hit the threshold for me to interact with you. Please, nope, you're gonna do it. So you start going into how in Europe, and I'm like, don't do it. How they get paid more, and that tipping isn't mandatory, and because they have a higher wage, it's more fair because you're not relying on the service. It's implied service. And I was like, great. Good. I'm glad that's in Europe. We're not in Europe. Also, I don't know if that's true, because I'm not going to Google it, but it doesn't sound right. But I understand the premise that, okay, we'll give everybody more money, and then you don't have to rely on the pittance of tips to make up the difference, so that it's fair. And it's like, yeah, that's a wonderful idea, except they're not getting then petition everybody to pay a fair wage. That would be great. If you want to get involved in social work like that, feel free to do it. Don't tell me about it, but feel free to do it. It's great. If you want to have everybody have a living wage and their job to be rewarding and not abusive, that's wonderful. Please. But don't tell the lady who is getting paid significantly less than a fair wage about how your $8 coffee is not worthy of their tip. Right? And I was just like, lady, no, don't. Just don't. And then she goes on this tear about how, after she talks about how the unfair, whatever, I'm sorry about the itch, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, well, I only tip for services. If I'm getting a service, then I tip. Otherwise, I don't tip. And I was like, lady, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, if you're providing me a service, I'll tip you then. And I was like, what do you think she's doing there? And now you did it. I have to engage with you. Now I have to engage with you. And I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? What do you think that lady is doing right now for you? And she's like, well, I only tip people who provide a service. And I was like, how are you getting your coffee? And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, what is the person doing right there? How are you going to get your coffee? And she's like, well, she's going to make it for you. And I was like, so the barista is going to provide you with the service of making you a coffee, right? That's a service. The good is the coffee being done. The service is the person making the coffee. That's a good and goods and services, right? You give them money, they provide you with the service of making you a coffee. That's a service. And she was like, well, like when they bring it to your table. And I was like, well, how is the coffee in your hand? How'd you get it? She's like, well, they put it over there and I get it. And I was like, well, how'd they do that? And she's like, well, they brought it over to the, I'm like, so they made a coffee for you and they provided the service of bringing it to you, putting it on that table and allowing you to get it. So like, that's a service. So by your own personal philosophy, you only pay people for their service. That's what you just got, dude. That's a service. What do you call that? If it's not a service, what did I just witness? How did you get it? She brought it to you. That's a service, right? So by your own philosophy, you're wrong. If you want to be like, dude, I just don't tip because I'm a cheap fuck and I don't feel like they're worthy of my $1.50 or whatever, or my 86 cents, because it auto does it. Like on there, you just hit the button, it does it for you. So you can do, whatever percentage right on your little card. You just hit no math, nothing. You just hit the button. It's done. It's done. It's in your hand. It's done. You know what I mean? It's done. Right there. We're done. So why not just do it? Okay? Or, instead of explaining in graphic detail why it's A-okay for you to be a dirtbag, just don't tip and mind your fucking business. It's that easy. We're done. No need for all this extra stuff. Just be done with it. Don't express to your whole party what a piece of shit you are and how it's A-okay that you're a scumbag, and then encourage them not to tip because you don't feel justified in your actions unless the entire group is on board with you being a dirtbag. Just don't hit no tip or hit custom tip and put your 25 cents or whatever on there, or just you might as well just hit no tip and then be done with it, and we can all know in our hearts that you're a bad person. And I don't have to interact with you at all. I don't have to explain to you what you should already know because it's coming out of your mouth. You know what I'm saying?